This will break the league if this trade happens. If you can find a way to get Giannis to OKC, they got all the draft picks. They got young talent that you can trade for him. Like, nobody can give you the assets that OKC can get you.
You just saw Paul Pierce suggesting that OKC should go and trade for Giannis. Now, keep in mind he said this before Chet Holmgren went down with a hip injury that could keep him out for months. With Chet and Isaiah Hartenstein out, the Thunder are suddenly a bit short on size. And Milwaukee, well, to say that they're struggling is an understatement. The Bucks are at the bottom of the East, and their star duo of Giannis and Dame isn't enough to stop the slide. Should Milwaukee actually pull the trigger on a reset and go for a Giannis trade? And does it make sense for OKC to swing for the fences here? Let me break it all down. First of all, what's in it for OKC? Giannis is obviously a top 3 player in the world, and assuming the other 2 in that top 3 are Jokic and Luka, he's the only one who's as good on defense as he is on offense. Pairing him with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander would probably lock in the Thunder as the championship favorite. We're essentially talking about teams having to deal with 2 MVP caliber players every night, which would be a nightmare for any defense. Plus, let's face it, Giannis changes the team's identity in a big way. He's the kind of guy who lifts everyone around him, brings tons of playoff experience, and could accelerate OKC's already fast-moving timeline by a couple of years. So far, OKC has been patient, stockpiling draft picks, developing their home talent, and building a deep and versatile roster. Last year was an obvious sign that what they've been cooking up in Oklahoma City is working, as that young core topped the West. Sure, they fell short against Dallas, but you could say they were a few shots and rebounds away from having that series go the other way. Plus, they've made the right updates to their roster by trading Giddey for Caruso and signing Hartenstein. Right now, when pretty much every single center they have is injured, they're able to throw out these scrappy 5-guard micro ball lineups that work surprisingly well. We've seen SGA, Lou Dort, J-Dub, Caruso, and either Isaiah Joe or Aaron Wiggins in 1-5. 6'6" Jalen Williams being the tallest of the bunch. Their next tallest available guy off the bench is 6'9" Ousmane Dieng, and the rest are 6'5" and under forwards and guards. Sure, they got to that 8-2 start with Chet, but this flexibility and adaptability they showed is definitely a good sign looking forward. It is a strength in numbers approach, and it would definitely be disrupted if they go all in for one star player. Now think about the Bucks side of things. With their rough start and the limitations of the second apron, Milwaukee is boxed in. They cannot bring more players in for depth or make moves to add more salary. And they've got Middleton dealing with ongoing injuries, making it even harder to compete. Right now, they're taking calls across the league, looking for ways to fix their roster, but so far, they've found nothing that works with their financial restrictions. At the moment, they're saying that Giannis is untouchable, which is not hard to understand, but for how long that can stay the case? And that's where OKC's insane pile of assets comes in. They have more picks than any other team thanks to the trades over the years, especially with the Clippers and Rockets. We're talking about a potential 5 or 6 first rounders that would go Milwaukee's way, plus some young players from OKC too. Even though Milwaukee doesn't want to let Giannis go, they might consider it if OKC makes an offer they can't refuse. So let's see what an actual trade package might look like. The most likely scenario? It definitely involves those first round draft picks, 5 or 6 like I said. Then Milwaukee would probably want either Chet Holmgren or Jalen Williams in any deal. Maybe even both if they're really holding their ground. But let's be honest, there's no universe where Thunder actually releases both of them. To be fair, both of them are most likely untouchable for OKC. Plus, to make it work financially, Lou Dort and a couple of other role players would have to be included too. But there are ways to keep both Chet and J-Dub and still get Giannis. I've run it through the ESPN's trade machine and found 2 possible scenarios. One where they trade 2 key defensive players and another one where they trade all of their depth away. Starting with the first one, OKC would need to trade Isaiah Hartenstein and Lou Dort plus all those picks of course. The thing is though, Hartenstein was signed this offseason, so he isn't eligible to be traded until December 15, 2024. After that day though, the green light is on, and if I'm being honest, it's probably the only scenario where OKC doesn't lose too much. But of course, it's missing some assets to make Milwaukee interested. They would want at least Topic or even C. Wallace to be included too. Now the other option where they keep Hartenstein but trade away their depth is this. Lu Dort, Cason Wallace, Ousmane Dieng, Jalen Williams, Kenrich Williams, and Nikola Topic for Giannis. Yeah, that's 6 players to 1, which doesn't really make much sense. Now let's think about OKC's overall timeline and the adjustments they would face. They're young, they're good, and they've built one of the deepest rosters in the league. This group has definitely grown together and the chemistry is showing up on the court. Throwing Giannis into the mix definitely changes that dynamic. OKC's recent success has come from their team-oriented play, with everyone buying into their roles and playing a scrappy, high-energy defense. They have role players like Dort, Caruso, or Jalen Williams who know what their job is and play within the system. With a superstar like Giannis, the entire culture shifts. OKC would need to reshape the whole offensive and defensive structure around him. Yes, Giannis is elite at defense, but it's a different approach than OKC's current switch-heavy, guard-focused defense. Offensively, you would also see a shift in approach. All of a sudden, everything would have to revolve not just around SGA, but Giannis too. Sure, Giannis is an unselfish player, but he's still the kind of star who requires the offense to run through him and is most successful with shooters around. Meaning, Shai would have to reorient his game a bit and prepare for more spot-up opportunities, which only makes up 9.5% of his possessions currently. And we know that Shai isn't a sharp shooter either. He's got the touch from the midi, but still has tons of work ahead on the three-pointer, as he's hitting them at only 35% career-wise and under 25% this season. Plus, both SGA and Giannis are top 3 in usage, which just adds to the awkward fit point. I think if OKC sticks to their young core, they have a chance to grow into a powerhouse in the near future. Look at the last 3 championship teams in Warriors, Nuggets, and Celtics. They've all built around their stars but didn't sacrifice their future for any one player. Instead, they just developed their talent over time and cleverly added vital pieces around it. I think OKC has those pieces to do the same thing if they stay patient. And let's not ignore the fact that going all in for Giannis would mean losing future flexibility. With the second apron, teams don't have as much leeway to bring in players when they are stacked with stars. If OKC trades for Giannis, they're basically all in on the current roster, and adding depth down the line becomes nearly impossible. So if they start losing players to injuries or contract issues, they would be left with little room to adjust or rebuild around Giannis. Sounds awfully familiar to the situation that Giannis is in right now. I just think that's a huge risk in today's NBA, where depth has proven to be more important than just having big names. And for Milwaukee, they might be tempted by the idea of a reset. If they can get back several first-rounders and young talent like Hartenstein, Wallace, Topic, and a defensive asset in Dort, they could start building a new core and move on from this Giannis era. That championship in 2021 is already an overachievement for such a small franchise, and it just seems like ever since, the things haven't been clicking for Milwaukee. Last year, adding Dame resulted in them finishing 3rd in the East but exiting the playoffs in the first round. This year, a horrific start and seemingly bleak future ahead. While it's not something we've seen coming from a European player before, we could see Giannis actually requesting to be traded if nothing changes. It wouldn't really be a Giannis move, as the humility radiates from the man, but let's be honest, he probably doesn't want to spend the prime of his career in a losing situation. Doc Rivers doesn't seem to be the right driver for this car, plus as I said before, even with a different coach, the Bucks are in a tough spot to improve. I just have a feeling that Doc Rivers will drive these Bucks straight to a rebuild, and if that's the case, as Paul Pierce said, no other team than OKC can offer as good of a deal. But maybe the bigger question here is, does this even make sense in today's NBA? Super teams have mostly fallen out of favor. Like I said, for OKC, the championship blueprint is already there. Deep balanced roster with homegrown talent. They don't necessarily need to risk everything for one player, even if that player is Giannis. In my eyes, it's a bit of a gamble to go all in for the next few seasons, especially seeing how well they're doing so far. It would leave them thinner, inflexible, and surprise surprise, wouldn't guarantee a chip either. The only guaranteed thing in this scenario would be that Thunder's games would be that much more entertaining to watch. Finally, let's think realistically here, it's only the start of the season. Milwaukee is off to a horrible start, and who knows, maybe Doc Rivers gets fired and the team improves. From OKC's point of view, they just have to wait it out a couple of months, and by then their big man rotation should all be healthy. There are some guys on two-way contracts for the meantime. Otherwise, they could always trade some of those picks for less demanding talent than Giannis to fill that gap. Nonetheless, when the truth throws out such an idea, it's always fun to consider it. But what do you think? Should OKC throw everything at Milwaukee for Giannis and bet on an immediate title shot? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this channel, like this video, and I'll see you in the next one.